We need a bigger hole in the bottom of this thing.
My standard line when I'm posting about it is songs and stories and activities from preschool. Because we had some older kids.
All righty.
My kids used to go down there.
It's a good program.
But
I mean, it socializes.
yeah, I had to mess with it.
Right-hand side.
Genealogy class. Yeah, it meets.
All right, it is 6:01. We will call the meeting to order, announce that there is a quorum present, and if you would join Miss Kaufman in a word of prayer, please.
Father God, we thank you for this day. We thank you for this community that we are so privileged to live in. I thank you, Lord, for each person who has come here tonight, for all of the council members and for our city administration. I pray, Lord, your blessing upon each person who is interested enough in our community to be present. And I pray, Holy Spirit, for your guidance as we move forward in every decision that we make. And I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. If you'd join us for our pledges of allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you all very much. Will you sit down? At this time, we will have council announcements. This is an opportunity for council and staff to share with each other anything that we may have. Council have any thoughts?
I would like to thank Jerry and his crew for working on holidays and everything, for fixing the water leaks and all that stuff. Taking away from your family and doing what needs to be done. So we appreciate that, Jerry, and all your guys.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just want to give you guys a quick update. We had meetings today with Deal and Performance Services on the remainder of the water meters. So we have 48 more meters that need to be installed. We have 32 meters that are in stock, the 3/4-inch meters that are in stock, and we're waiting on 10-inch-and-a-half water meters that are on order. So once they arrive, the remaining meters will be installed, and then Deal will move forward with the interface. We also had 2 conference calls this afternoon with, or 2 times today with Deal and with Encode to get the sync between the online portal, our portal, and all the billing. So we're moving forward with that, and they said we can anticipate 30 to 60 days. All the interfaces will mesh and line up, and then we'll have all the city staff trained up on the portals, and then we'll be able to roll it out live for the community.
Very good. Thank you, Chris, for that. Council, have anything else? If not, I do have something, especially since Paul brought that up. Jerry?
Yes, sir.
Along with you and your guys and all the work that y'all do on a regular basis, I got this email a month ago, and I told him I would share this with you, and I haven't done it yet, and I apologize I haven't gotten to you yet, but I want to share that in front of everybody right now because of what this man said. He said, "Hello, I really do not know who to send this to. Maybe you can pass it on to whoever. I have had 2 dealings with Jerry over at the convenience center, and I truly appreciate him. He is so willing to be helpful We need more people like him. I just wanted to pass this along from Ken Malden. So Jerry, again, thank you as you guys are out there and y'all represent the city. Here's an individual who really wants you to know that he appreciates you, and absolutely, I hope you know how much that council appreciates all you do. And also that goes along with all of our other department heads and services here in town, but Jerry, I wanted to give that to you publicly, so thank you for all you do. Council have any other comments? Okay, then we will move on to 5.0. This is our public comments and receipt of petitions. At this time, anyone will be allowed to speak on any matter other than personnel matters or matters under litigation for a length of time not to exceed 3 minutes. No council or board discussion or action may take place on a matter until such matter has been placed on an agenda and posted in accordance with law. Does anyone in the public would like to stand up and speak? All you do is just come right up here to our pretty podium, also that Jerry built, by the way, just point that out, and let us know. Okay, seeing none, I will close the public comments section. We'll move on to our consent agenda. Council's had an opportunity to look over the minutes from our last meeting. Does anyone have anything about that? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilman Martin, seconded by Councilwoman Coppin to approve the minutes as is. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Moving on to 7.0, this is our presentation section. This is to recognize Lynn Shelley for 5 years of service to the city of Clyde.
She's not here. She
Where
had
did
to
you
take
go,
the day
Lynn?
off. Lynn,
I know, Lynn.
Yeah,
Where
she-
did she go?
she's not here. She had to take off today. She had some medical stuff.
Well, we hate to see that, but again, where's her certificate? I want to at least read it to the citizens and tell them. This is a certificate that we will give to Lynn. Connie will make sure she gets. It just says, the city of Clyde presents a certificate to Lynn Shelley in recognition of your outstanding service and dedication to the city of Clyde. We commend you for your 5 years of service. So again, we do thank her very much for her service to us and all that she does. And as y'all know, especially in the last couple of years, it's hard to keep people. It's hard to keep anybody. So 5 years is a milestone nowadays, it seems like. All right, moving on to 7.2. 7.2 is moved to end of agenda due to scheduling conflict, so we'll move on to 7.3. 7.3 is a presentation from Steve Adams of Specialized Public Finance. Mr. Adams, thank you very much.
I'm actually Paul Jason. It's
Sorry,
Stephen's
I apologize for that.
He's somewhere else tonight, so
Okay.
I've got a hard copy as well. Chris was able to get it uploaded. So again, Paul Jason with Specialized Public Finance. We serve as financial advisor to the city. This is related to item 8.1, which is an action item. It's the CO, the notice of intent. There's also an information item in here related to a refunding opportunity. So on page 1 of the presentation, we're looking at potentially refunding the 2013 A certificates of obligation. They have rates ranging from 4% to 5%. Currently, rates are in the low 4% range right now. That would provide savings of roughly $650,000 total savings over the life of the transaction, roughly around $32,500 a year. An important metric to review is you want to save at least 3% on net present value of the debt you're selling. This is at 6% right now. These rates have about 25 basis points of cushion, so you're double what the typical metric is to achieve for a refunding opportunity. Despite the run-up in rates, last year and a little bit this year, there still is a refunding opportunity. Also on the COs, we have a summary of the projects working with Chris and Connie in here. The COs are structured as a 30-year term with a 10-year call, meaning you can refinance or prepay those after 10 years. The estimated cost on the COs, because those go out a little longer, are 4.62% versus the refunding bonds at around 4.1%. Page 2 is just a list of projects. I hope these are still accurate, and Chris and Connie can correct me if not, but you can see the list of projects that we're looking at financing with the certificate of obligation. the sports complex, and then, some equipment, and then some upgrades to the utility system as well, and some road construction. So overall, we would want to deliver $4 million in proceeds for the certificate issue. Page 3 is just the overview of the refunding transaction. We're assuming, again, a rate of 4.08%. These refunding bonds have a final maturity of 2043. The savings is around $32,500 a year, and we expect to close the same time we would close on the COs if the market holds. If rates move against us and we can't achieve at least a savings comparable to what we showed you, we're not going to do the transaction. We'll come back to this council, at a later date. But if rates keeps, where they are, or they continue to go down a little bit, then we think we can execute a savings structure similar to what we're showing you tonight. Next page just assumes we maintain your A- rating with Standard & Poor's. Also an important component of this is your audit. Looks like that's going to be approved tonight.
It's gonna be, he's not done. It'll be in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
They'll approve it.
We would just need to have that before we price the bonds, the audit. It sounds like that should be no problem at all. This is the refunding bond issue. Again, this is refunding the 2013 COs. You're selling roughly $7 million in debt. There is a premium. There is some money in your debt service fund. This is the issue related to the refunding that would save the amount that I mentioned on previous pages. Next page is related to the COs. This, again, is an action item. This really just kicks off the process for the COs with this council. If you choose to do so, move forward tonight. It allows essentially Connie to publish the notice of intent in the paper and kick off the process to sell certificates. Again, that structure is based off a 30-year structured level debt, roughly around $260,000 once we level it out in 2028. And then we feel we use pretty conservative growth estimates, just driving around today, just seeing some of the developments that are underway that Clyde has not seen in years. Extremely important. So we feel these growth estimates are conservative. We worked with Chris and Connie on those. So that's what would be required if you choose to pay these COs with property taxes, roughly 12.5 cents. Page 6, $4 million in COs would be issued. We generate $4 million in proceeds. There's a premium there, so we can cover all the costs, and the city can deliver $4 million for the projects we mentioned on previous pages. Page 7 is the timeline. Again, here tonight, the refunding is just an information item. The CO is an action item related to the resolution to kick that process off. We'll go through the rating process again, work with your staff. We'll set the rates in June. So having the audit in a few weeks is going to be fine. That's when the rates will be set, and then we'll close roughly a month later. Overall, that's a kind of a quick overview of the two items. And then it's just an interest rate graph. Rates overall have come down a little bit the last 5 or 6 weeks. Historically, we're still kind of below the average. These transactions are falling in line with the rates that we received in 2022. Our rate on the 22 COs were around 4.5%, so we're really close to where those rates were last year. So happy to entertain any questions on either item. So thank you.
Very good, very good. Council, have any questions? Have any thoughts you want to share?
I just would request that for the sake of our citizens, that you give an explanation of what CO is. I mean, I know it's an acronym that
Sure.
many understand, but many probably do not.
Sure, no, absolutely. It's a debt instrument it's called a certificate of obligation. It's been common practice for the city to sell COs. That's what you sold in 2022. It requires this council to authorize a notice of intent to go in the paper. This council cannot award or sell those bonds sooner than 45 days of the first publication. So if there is a petition, residents have the opportunity to voice their opinion on the transaction and on the debt. So if there is a valid petition that's gathered prior to 45 days or when this council awards the COs, it would force a bond election. But it's an extremely common debt instrument to use for basic infrastructure and public work type projects. The state legislator, I'm sure Chris has been following this, is trying to do all they can to prohibit these. So a lot of cities are doing all they can because it's been a tool that cities have used for multiple decades to get these bonds sold or COs sold prior to September 1st. It's gonna be really hard in the future to sell COs. It's gonna force, no matter what you do, if it's a utility project, it's gonna force you to go to the voters. Potentially, that's what this legislature is trying to do. So that's what a CO is. It's a really common tool for all cities to sell debt. So,
Thank you.
Council, have any other questions? Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it
Thank
very
you.
much. Great information. 7.4, this is a presentation from the David Pettit Group on the establishment
They're
of.
running a little late.
Okay, we will also move 7.4 to the bottom. So at this time, we'll go into 8.0. This is our regular agenda. 8.1 is to consider and act upon approving a resolution of the City Council of the City of Clyde, Texas, directing publication of notice of intention to issue combination tax and revenue certificates of obligation and resolving other matters relating to the subject. Mr. McGuire.
So, Mr. Mayor, Council, citizens, as Paul just gave in the presentation, this $4 million will allow us to work through a number of projects. Most importantly, it allows us to rehab the Elmdale water facility. That's roughly $700,000, and that is in need of immediate repair. It also gives us the ability to purchase the equipment that we need to start paving the roads in the city. That's the asphalt zipper and the paving machine. It also gives us the ability to replace, aging vehicles in the fleet. Most of the public works vehicles are over 25 years old. We've got vehicles that are burning through 4 quarts of oil a week now. We have community service, community development has vehicles that need to be replaced that are almost the same age. So this gives us an opportunity to purchase 7 vehicles and start retiring these old vehicles that are costing us a fortune in maintenance and costing us a fortune in gas. It also gives us the ability to put in the road for the sports complex. You saw the line item in there for that. And then some additional add-ons inside the sports complex where we agreed to expand parking lots, some asphalt work, things like that that need to be done so that that project can support all the participants and everybody that'll be using the parking and using the park in a safe manner. So we explored all kinds of options to do this, knowing that with the pending legislation, this tool for cities might go away. We were very conservative. We went back and forth. There's actually more projects that we wanted to accomplish, but we felt very comfortable with the payback of the roughly $265,000 a year. That's factored into the pro forma that I sent council last week, so that it's all factored in the revenue side. So we don't anticipate, just like we did with the previous certificates of obligation, we're paying this with excess revenue. So this is not taking it to a bond election and raising people's taxes based on property value on bonds. This is doing this within the city's means. And if we don't do these projects, they're going to get more and more expensive. And the water tower has to be fixed. We've already been cited by TCQ on making the necessary repairs. And then there's also maintenance that has to be done on the remaining standpipes throughout the city. They need to be cleaned, they need to be desanitized, they need to be painted. There's corrosion issues that have to be dealt with. So this $4 million is a must spend that we have to do to be able to keep the city moving forward and finish all the infrastructure projects that we've started and all the modernization that we're trying to accomplish for the city.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. McGuire. Council, have any questions for Mr. McGuire concerning any of this information? No, if everybody understands that and agrees with that, then I would entertain a motion to approve the resolution as stated.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman White, seconded by Councilman McGuire to approve the resolution as Chris explained it. All those in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank y'all very much. Moving on to 8.2. This is to consider and act upon approving a utility easement. Mr. McGuire?
So, Mr. Mayor, council, and citizens, for the construction of the new Starbucks, when we were trying to make connections for water and sewer lines, the easiest point to make a connection to was lines on the north side of the property. They fell on, those lines crossed Rick Rose's property. So Mr. Rose has granted the city an easement so that we could connect the water and sewer lines on the north side of the property. Mr. Rose graciously gave the easement to the city at no cost to the, excuse me, to the city. And this also helped us with the project and lower the expense of trying to make the water line connections off the access road and the issues that we would have had to deal with traffic, TxDOT, and some other variables. So this wound up being a very cost-effective measure and moved the project along and kept that project in its timeline. So from the city staff to the Roses, we want to say thank you because they didn't have to do this. And they certainly didn't have to do it at no cost to the city.
Yeah, definitely.
So I would recommend that you agree to the utility easement. The Roses have signed the utility agreement, or the utility easement.
Council have any thoughts or questions? All right, and we do definitely thank the Rose family for making that allowance. That was very nice of them, very conscientious of the citizens. With that in mind, I would entertain a motion by council to approve the easement.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Have a motion by Councilman Rector, seconded by Councilwoman Kaufman to approve the easement. All those in favor? That passed unanimously. Thank y'all very much. That will move us on to 8.3. This is Camilla White and Glenda Farmer concerning water meter progress. Ms. White, yes, please come up to the deal. Again, we know, but tell Connie your name and address, please.
Camilla White, 525 South First Street, West Clyde, Texas. I guess, I know you said there's some stuff going on that I guess they're still waiting on meters, and then it's gonna be about 2 to 3 months. So how much, what's the total time frame? About 3-4 months between the meters and when they'll have this app ready?
It sounded like 2 to 3 months. We'll have the meters done, and we're working on.
30 to 60 days to complete the interface.
To go live.
Right, and then it's what, you're gonna have about another month before you can put it out for everybody to put it on the app or to understand how to look at their
Yeah,
water
we need to
meters
do the
or-
staff training.
Right, so that's what I was trying to get, is it like, are we looking 4 or 5 months down the road?
We're still waiting, Camilla, on everything that we've waited on since we started. I mean, our time frame for training and our time frame for turning this over for the public, for yourself
Right.
to be able to be involved, all is the same frame. It's all hinging on these variables that we haven't been able to handle. So now that we've given you the time frame on that, you're still looking at 30 to 60 days once that's there, so.
Right, that's what I was trying to-
Figure you're probably looking at 3 to 4 months before we can actually get
Provided they
you.
get the valves and get it in,
Exactly, yeah.
and then go from there. Because like I say, the initial concern is being able to check the meter and then have you guys, which you're not always available
We're
to come
always
out.
available. We've actually been more available to you than anybody in
Well,
this community.
there's been a circumstance, I know you weren't here last meeting, but
I
there
was
was a.
here in everything but physical body. I know what you're talking
So,
about. I'm a
I mean,
little-
it waited till the next day. Fortunately, there wasn't anything going on, but I couldn't check it when I wanted to check
You can
it.
check it anytime you want. Call the city, we will be there. Just like before, when you called and we got there. Not only did we get there, we got there
Right,
earlier
well,
than you actually wanted. I mean,
this
I've
time,
not
I guess
yet
y'all were
met
broke down.
anybody who was upset at us
Yeah.
being there early.
Right.
You seem to be,
Well,
you know,
no, the thing was, the day before, they couldn't come out because something came up. They broke down something, they were out and they couldn't come out.
Yeah.
So in other words, they couldn't come out till the next day. So in that respect, if there had been anything going on, I wouldn't have been able to, I wouldn't know that I needed to shut things off. Cause you can't always see the leaks. You can't always see the water spot. You can't
Do
always.
you have that much
No.
problem at your house? I mean, is your
Well,
plumbing that bad? I'm not
I'll
understanding
say,
why it's so.
I'll say this, a year ago, and I didn't know it, but apparently I had copper lines
Yeah.
because it is
But
1960s.
we've talked about this before, so
It
you've
had
already
copper lines
addressed that,
and it,
correct?
and it ended up leaking.
Yeah, I know, we've
And,
gone over this
and
time
I didn't even
again.
see it in the walls. I didn't even know. And the leak wasn't as detectable. There was a small movement, and which is why I was keeping
Yeah,
eye on it.
which
And-
is again,
and I had
something
my
that we
yeah.
continue to work with you on, so.
And I do check things, I try what I can see, but
Sure.
then there's faucets that might start to leak. I got dog waterers so I don't actually see every time or something's leaking.
I don't know how you
So-
having access to the meter is going to keep your faucet from
Because
leaking.
they always had that little diamond on there that you could watch.
Yeah.
You could stand there and you could see whether it's moving, if
But
everything's
You
off.
wouldn't be able to tell any other way, okay.
Right,
All right,
exactly.
well, we've answered the question though,
Exactly.
time and again, and I apologize for sounding short with you. It's just that you continue to come back with the same exact question
Well,
over and over again,
no,
which I
well,
love.
my
I've
other
wanted
question-
people to
I
come in
was
and
just
ask these
trying to figure
questions,
out-
but you're,
yeah.
you're asking the same question like you expect a different answer every
No,
time, and I
no,
don't
this was all
understand that.
about how much more, I know initially it was all
I know,
forecasted
and
for
we've asked you to come in
January,
and speak to
right.
Chris, you've come in multiple, times, so I'm not understanding the necessity of continually going over the same item.
Well, this was addressed before I got up to talk, but at the same time, the only reason I asked was about what we're looking for, cause I know initially it was projected for like January. So I wasn't sure how much longer I'm gonna need to call to look at my meter in order to check it,
Yeah,
you
check
know?
it anytime
And
you
when you're
want.
saying.
Just give us a
it's-
call.
It's a few months for this and a few months for that, I was just kinda, okay, are we looking at 5 months?
And
in
that's the
and that's
thing, I mean,
providing
each
they
time
get
you ask
everything.
that question, we give you that answer, but then when you ask again and we explain, or you call up here, or you come up here, which is great, and I appreciate you doing that, but when you come up here and we give you that information, it's like then you still come and ask the same thing of the
Well,
information
actually-
you already have. So again, I'm just questioning.
Yeah, no, this is
The
actually the most,
continuation.
or the most current information that's been given. As
okay.
far, and I will say that, this is the first time that it's been brought up that they've got 2 to 3 months from the time that they finish the water meters, that the water meters are still on hold, in other
Well, we
words.
explained
the
even
water meters
last
haven't
month when
made
I
it.
wasn't here, I mean, it's been explained multiple times that what we're waiting on, the supply
Mm.
problems that we've had, the interface problems that we've had, that's been explained to you when you've come in.
Right, but
individually and
not really
everything
a
else,
time
so.
frame, I mean, as far as it'll, what you're looking at once they do
Okay.
get those
Well, then
meters.
based on the information that
So
we had
it's more
earlier
than-
in
yeah,
this,
yes.
now, what's the next question? So
That
where-
was,
are you
that
good?
was all I was
Okay.
just kind of figuring out the time
Good.
frame because he mentioned a little bit of,
Yeah.
this would take a little bit, this would take some. Are we looking at a total of 2 months, or are we looking at 4 or 5 months
Well,
based on the meters
Yes,
getting
based
in?
on the same way, that-
So-
and we're just as aggravated as a city as you are as a citizen on what's happened that's been out of our control. But again, we are working on this absolutely as best we can and passing that information along as it comes, so.
Right, cause I'm
Please don't
just,
hesitate
I'd like
to
to
call
be
up
able
here or-
to look at it
Yeah.
without having to
And like I
call
say,
y'all. And
right.
I know, projected it's been a few months past that and things are apparently
Yeah.
still hung
When
up.
we're there,
on
you'll have that
whatever.
access, and I'm excited for you to have that access.
Me too.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. White. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on to 9.0. This is a point where we will move into executive session. The council may enter into closed or executive session to discuss the following. We convene into closed meeting pursuant to the provisions of Chapter 551 Government Code, Vernon's Texas Code, annotated in accordance with the authority contained in under economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank y'all so much for being here. I'm taking it after we come out of executive session. If the petty group is here, we will move into
Go
that.
into their presentation.
So, Mr. Reed, totally up to you. You wanna stick around? And everybody else is welcome to stick around. Love to have y'all. Look forward to giving y'all the information that the petty group will give us on the TERS. These are things that are very valuable to us as a city and that are a great tool for us to utilize. Really want you to have that information, so please, by all means, if y'all wanna stick around, do. If not, we will see y'all next time, and thank you for being here, and that's probably them.
That may be them right there.
If it is, we will wait, executive session. Thank you, sir, appreciate that.
More people in the city.
That's,
Haven't been any of that time.
So yes, ladies and gentlemen, this is what our 8.4 was. So we will hold off on convening into executive session. They will be able to give us some great information. Mr. McGuire, do you want to say anything concerning this to start it off?
yeah, so, council, Mr. Mayor, citizens, I've been working with David and Natalie from the David Pettit Group. This is a tool, an economic development tool, that will allow us to create some tax increment reinvestment zones. And they'll go into detail of the process and what it does. But essentially, long story short, is it's gonna give us a tool where we can help incentivize economic development and pass on some of the infrastructure costs to the developer. So once these zones are established and there's value added inside the tax zone, we will portion a part of the tax revenue into a TERS account. And then as the project completes milestones, then the project gets reimbursed back. So instead of us having to issue debt to stay ahead of the growth and put infrastructure in the ground and all things that we're trying to do to posture the city for growth, this becomes a tool that puts the costs on the developers and then reimburses the developers.
Good.
It's more technical than that, but
Yeah, and they will take that at this point right
Do
here.
is there a
Yes, ma'am,
clicker?
if you don't
I'll
mind.
run this slide for you.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to give you all my back. Thank you so much for having us today. And thank you to Mr. McGuire for engaging with us. We're really excited to be working with y'all. We're working with your neighbors just a little bit to the west. We've been working with Robert Hanna to create a TERS out in Abilene, and so we're really excited to be working with y'all as well. I'm here with the CEO, President, Founder, David. He'll be. And I apologize, we thought we were 30 minutes early. It looks like we're 30 minutes late, so I apologize for that. But we're excited to talk to y'all about this tool. If you'll go to the next slide, we're just gonna give you a really quick overview about who we are and, you know, why we're qualified to work with you on this. David's gonna talk about the tax increment financing as a concept and how it works, the mechanism of it. I'll go through some of the zones that I worked with Mr. McGuire to identify that we think are prime candidates for the creation of a TERS. We'll discuss some of our proposed next steps. We're very open to hearing from you guys back what you think about the terms that we're talking about in terms of the boundaries for the zones that we're looking at. And then if the next steps work for you in terms of scheduling. And then we'll be happy to take any questions. So a lot of times people ask us, you know, that dreaded cocktail party question, so what do you do? And we really work in the space between the real estate development community and municipalities and counties in structuring public-private partnerships. What is a public-private partnership? We're not necessarily talking about P3s like you might think about when you're building a city hall or some sort of public facility, but it's more about the contractual agreement between the public agency and the private sector. So again, that real estate developer and the city and county. We only do work in the state of Texas, so we feel we're very qualified to talk about what the tools are at your disposal here in Texas. And then when we're working with developers, we know what we can and cannot ask for and what is legally permissible. So again, what side do you work for? We work for both sides. I will say that our favorite clients are cities. I know you guys have had the opportunity to work with some developers, and they're not always the easiest bunch to work for, so we really prefer to work on the city side. But having worked on the developer side as well, we can anticipate the questions that are gonna come, and we're able to kind of guide both parties through that process. Ultimately, our goal is we're never here to kill a deal. We're here to make sure that the deal works for both sides and ultimately get some vertical development that produces profit for the developer, but also creates tax revenue for the city. Some of our sample public entity clients include Abilene, as I mentioned, the city of El Paso, Grand Prairie, Colleyville, Trophy Club, Kerrville, Tyler. We do a lot of work in North Texas, but like I said earlier, we do work anywhere in the state of Texas. Some of our developer clients include Heinz, Centurion American, Majestic Realty, Trademark, Fine Line Diversified, and Jackson Shaw and Cypress Equities. I'll hand it over to David to let him talk about the mechanism.
Thank you all very much. David Pettit with David Pettit Economic Development. You saw the better half first, so now you got to deal with me for a couple of slides. But I've been doing this for a while, approaching 30 years. So it's you know a thing or two because you've seen a thing or two, right? Like the farmer's commercial. So there's no stupid questions. I'm always one of those that is in your position. If you have a question, feel free to ask it. But if we can go to the next slide, tax increment financing is a tool that incentivizes, and I wanted to insert another word, funds economic development within a tax increment reinvestment zone. So we use those interchangeably, TIF and TERS. TIF being kind of the verb and TERS being kind of the noun. It's governed by the Texas Tax Code, Chapter 311. There's been hundreds of these. You've probably read stories about these that have been very successful. And so cities in partnership with other, alone or in partnership with other taxing units can use this tool to pay for improvements in a zone that will attract new development. That's our goal. Facilitate investment and bring excitement and energy to a designated area. We go to the next slide. A TERS can pay for infrastructure, it can pay for public improvements, you can pay for economic development programs. That was added in 2005. Tells you how long I've been around. And so we used to only have to be able to pay for what was in the public right of way. But now we can use, and I think Mr. McGuire has brought to you 380 agreements, economic development grants, to where we can give grants to developers to help fund their projects through the use of this increment. And we can also fund other projects benefiting the zone. So there's not much we can't fund under a TERS. Just know that it's public right-of-way, public infrastructure, and when there is needed, we can also do economic development grants. This is probably one of the most important slides that we really, it comes from a textbook that we've modified a little bit. And people talk about tax increment financing. It's not a new tax on development. It redirects a portion of tax generated from new development within a TERS. So I always like to say, think of a vacant piece of land. So it's currently generating no increment. If you were to create a TERS around that piece of property and you did a 75-25, 75 cents goes into a TERS fund to pay for improvements in that fund, 25 cents goes into the general fund. And so if you did not have the TERS, there would not be any new development. And so that's kind of the but-for test that we get into. So when you establish a TERS, you establish a base year, and then there's two ways to generate increment. One is through new construction, which is the most popular, or one is annual appreciation. So let's say you put it around an existing downtown and you have a 3% growth, or if you live in Texas, in your homes, they're always the 10% cap. So you always have that growth. Those are the only two ways that you generate income. So we're talking about facilitating new investment in these zones. New capital, private investment. Public investment is great, but it doesn't increase the tax revenue to the taxing entities. So we're trying to encourage that private investment. And so, like I said, let's just assume a 50-50 here. 50% of that new increment, so I always like to say 50% of something's better than 100% of nothing. So 50% is going to pay for what you have chosen to fund, whether major infrastructure, reimbursing a developer, let's say, that has some major infrastructure to do development. And then 50% is going back to your general fund. So that's that 50% of something's better than 100% of nothing that I always talk about. You'll hear me say that a lot. I know that Natalie gets tired of me saying it, but I think it rings true. So that's the old man in me. So an example of tax increment financing, and this is just an example, but let's say that we had a current year property tax value of $300,000. The base year was established 2 to 3 years ago of $200,000. So you continue to collect the taxes on that $200,000, but there's this new incremental property tax or value of $100,000. So where does that money go? Because it's new to the city coffers, it's new to all the taxing jurisdictions. So you're deciding to put a portion. Here under this example, we talked about putting 75% of the tax rate. So of the total revenue that's generated, 544 would go into the TIF, and 181 would go into the general fund. And then, of course, if the other taxing jurisdictions, they do have the opportunity to participate. Depending on the local politics, we sometimes get the county to participate, depending. We're meeting with the city of Denton. They've had a TIF that's in place for about 10 years, don't have the county. We might get them tomorrow, but you never know. So they do have the opportunity. But once again, this is new revenue to those taxing jurisdictions that's coming in. And you're paying for bricks and mortar, public infrastructure, but you're also funding projects that otherwise, but for this TIF participation, would be moving forward. So in the next slide, we talk about private development activity. Why would you create a TERS? And you have private development activity is expected to occur within a designated area. It benefits an area at large rather than being project specific. So I think in our discussions with Chris that we had talked about several, y'all have done several 380s that might be project specific. This can be a general area. So instead of just bringing you one project at a time, you're trying to redevelop an entire area. So that's where these become very popular. It provides a funding source without impacting the current amount of general funds for each participating taxing entity. It has the ability to leverage revenues from taxable property within the TERS to generate a larger increment. The best TIF projects are those that don't ask for money. So they come in, they build, 100% that goes into the TERS, and you're not having to pay out anything to reimburse for infrastructure. As a person that administered a TERS, I administered the downtown Fort Worth TERS when I first came to Fort Worth from San Antonio. And the best projects were those that would build and they never asked for anything, because then I could use that money where I wanted to. And so there's multiple ways to be able to approach and attract developers. The TERS attracts developers and investment into an area that may not otherwise occur. With our private clients, you will not believe how many go, do they have any incentives in place? Is there a TIF in place? What is their likelihood of doing the TIF? So by doing the TIF up front, it lays that foundation and that groundwork and that roadmap about what your expectations are before they even get going. Because time is money, and so they want to make sure that they're investing in an area in a community that's dedicated to making this happen. They don't want to hire us to educate you, and 6 months down the road, they're going, not for us, kind of deal. And overall, it demonstrates a commitment to creating a sense of place and identity. So, also, we have found, this is not in any textbook, but from our experience, that why do we create a TERS? It's for business creation retention. Sometimes we'll create these for the relocation or retention of a targeted business or something that the community needs. Gap financing, a developer says, we'd really like to go there, but our numbers don't work. We need you to help pay for X. This is the development would not otherwise occur. And for infrastructure improvements, to foster development, typically focusing on infrastructure needs. So basically, those are the three main categories that we focus on. That business creation, retention, gap financing, and infrastructure needs. You are not alone in considering TERS. I lost count. The comptroller keeps a list of all the cities that have done TERSs. It has to be north of 500 cities. And there's multiple counties that have done it. But as you can see the list here, Abilene is in its second or third, Natalie? Second TIF. We've done a number of TIFs for Arlington. I did a TIF for Azle. Salina, I think, Salina's had tremendous growth, and I think they're on TIF number 13 right now. Yeah. We do TIFs for El Paso, Farmers Branch. Fort Worth is in TIF number 15. So you can see that it's well represented. We're working with the city of Grand Prairie on several of their TIFs. Kaufman, we've done about 3 TIFs with them. We've worked with a lot of these. Stephenville, we did 1 TIF and they got a little taste of it and they go, well, this is such a great product. Help us. And how many do we have now?
I think they've
With the-
expanded their tours 5 times.
5, so essentially, we started out with 1, and then we just expanded because you can have contiguous and non-contiguous. So essentially, they have 5 different TIFs. So you can see that you're well represented there. To get into specifics, I'm gonna turn it over to Natalie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, David. So as David mentioned, the tours, a great time to create a tours is when you know that there's development that is imminent. As he mentioned, it's great to lay the groundwork. It signals to the developer or the development community at large that you are ready to come to the table with a public-private partnership and that you understand that this is a tool that is used in other communities and basically you're ready to play ball. This particular tours number 1, the boundaries were greatly influenced by the potential development that is occurring because of the stadium that you guys are building in the sports complex. I think it makes a lot of sense with a catalytic project like that that's coming off the ground and is in its early stages to go ahead and establish the TERS quickly, relatively quickly, because the TERS value is set as of January 1 of the year in which it's created. So as long as you created this particular TERS before December 31st, the end of the year is very, very busy for us because people are trying to capture that value at the end. But the assessor will set the value as of January 1 of that year. So as long as nothing has occurred as of January 1, then the value of this land is as is, it's vacant before any dirt has moved or anything has, leaked, if you will, to increase the value of the land. There's a couple of different projects, and I don't know, Mr. McGuire, if you want to touch on that as to kind of how this came about, but we initially were looking just south of 20, and then we decided to include the area north there. I went ahead and labeled it at 65 acres because I think there's additional potential development there, and so I'll let you speak to that.
The concept behind doing this TERS 1, and as Natalie said, the sports complex is the catalyst, and it's the catalyst for the growth that we're seeing throughout the city. It's brought in Starbucks, it's brought in the apartment complex, it's brought in multiple development opportunities. But, as council knows, we are working with a developer whose intention is to take down 38 acres of land, do 1 hotel immediately, pad site for a 2nd hotel, and then pad site for retail space. And he's also looking to do a multifamily housing unit out in that area as well. That is the front acreage. The remaining acreage comes down into Mr. Yates's property, and I've had conversations with Mr. Yates about that, and he's got development goals as well. So this is another tool that'll help incentivize and bring on some more investors into these projects. And then the 65 acres on the north side, that property is up for sale and lease, and there's potential clients that are looking at that, and there's development that has had some developers come in here to talk to us with Hunter Yates about the property and about developing that as well. And that was one of the questions that I was asked. Is the TERS in place? What's the city willing to do to do this? Now, the developer that's looking to do the pad site, retail pad site, the multifamily, and the hotels was adamant that the only way that this project would make financial sense was if the TERS were in place. So, being proactive, we started this process, and we've been working on this for the last couple of months to get everything into place so that once the TERS is established and the real estate transactions are done, he can move forward with the project immediately. And that was part of commissioning the hotel feasibility study. So the hotel feasibility study and the pro formas that were done on that show that the hotel is a very viable project and the payback's 5 years. So the developer is thrilled with the number.
These hotels have probably done some construction in TERS before?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was one of the main questions that the hotel developer asked right away was a TERS in place, and was the city even gonna consider a TERS? So that started the research, that started reaching out to Natalie and David to figure this out. You know, and I had called the council and I had told you that this was, I knew where my strong points were, and I didn't want to over-incentivize a project. And this was a way to make sure that I wasn't giving away too much to bring somebody in, because if it didn't happen with one, we knew the project was viable, somebody else was gonna come in behind it. And this was the guidance, and this was the step, and this was what I was repeatedly hearing from the other developers. And when we get to TERS 2, we'll talk about another development, same concept, that developer asked the very same question about, is a TERS in place to help facilitate the rapid growth of that project as well.
Mr. Manager, if I can just add, just because you're in a TERS does not entitle you to money. That is to be separately negotiated. It lays the foundation and the groundwork. You ultimately have, I like to say, there's two mother mayors. There's a TIF board that's made up of you that recommends to yourself, okay? Whether you're gonna enter into an agreement for those. And so the discussion about whether you're gonna over-incentivize a project is something that we specialize in. We can give you metrics and say, this is kind of in the ballpark. We think that's a little rich. Natalie and I were just talking about, we're representing a city, and we said, we don't think in good conscience we can go with what the developer's recommending. We have to tell our client. So that's what we're here for. And we've worked on both sides. So we don't want to over-incentivize, but we also don't want to under-incentivize to where the project doesn't happen. Because then you just waste time, and then you're waiting for something else, and it leaves a little bit of a black eye. But I just wanted to make sure that you understand that just because you put a TIF in place doesn't mean you have to spend that money.
Right.
It's not an entitlement.
No, that's great, and we
And
appreciate.
by creating this, you're not having to do each specific project. It's projects in that
Well,
area.
the way it works is I always say that creating the TERS is like making the pie, and then each development agreement is a slice of the pie. And so, but we're putting, we're putting the mechanism in place, and as David said, we're not entitling them to a piece of the pie. As he mentioned, sometimes developers think, okay, well, I'm building in a TERS, so I get 50% of my taxes back. That's not how it works. You still have to apply for a development agreement, but the mechanism is in place, and again, it really establishes that base year. There's a lot of different ways you can slice the pie, and I don't wanna get too into the weeds about it, but one of the things that, as David mentioned, will help with the analysis, and the hotel project is a great example of just the additional net benefits that come with incremental tax revenue outside of just the real property. So when we're talking about a TERS, by statute, you can pledge real property and also sales tax to a TERS. We would recommend just sticking to real property tax revenue. And so whenever you're looking at the incremental value that a project like a hotel could bring, it has sales tax, it has the hot tax, it has the real property. So when we say 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing, we're only really talking about the real property tax. But what we'll do is we'll take that analysis a step further and say this is the total net benefit to your community. That really helps when you're talking to your citizens about, okay, you're giving them 50% of the tax. Well, okay, it's not just the city's real property. This is the benefit to the ISD. This is the benefit to the county. These are the hotel sales tax revenues that come along with it, and it helps to kind of build that bigger picture. And so you can really see that, again, it ends up being a net benefit to everyone. This type of property is just so well suited for a TERS, especially too because, as David mentioned, there's different things that a TERS can pay for, but the easiest sell is always going to be the infrastructure. So when you're paying for roads, water, sewer, those types of needs are just easier to stomach than just giving out a grant, right, to a developer. And so when you're dealing with raw land like this, it's real easy to find those infrastructure needs that might need to be paid for. And they're a little bit more in the city wheelhouse in terms of paying for it. You would be reimbursing the developer. So we think this is a really good candidate, and I'll go ahead and move on to the next TERS. So it says area 1 and 2. As David mentioned, the TERS does not have to be contiguous. When I was first talking to Mr. McGuire, we were actually really focused on this south portion of this area, here along, I guess, the south of South First Street. And then I kind of noticed, I guess, are we in the TERS right now, this proposed area, right? Yes, we are. I kind of started asking about, what do you call your main street, what's your downtown, and he mentioned Oak Street. And so looking at the area, I went ahead and looked at these boundaries because I think that they make sense in terms of trying to find opportunities to capture value, but also trying to find opportunities where you might be able to spend some TERS funds. So I think there's a catalytic project here. I don't know if you want to mention it or.
Yes, so the concept behind the original staying on the south side is Callahan County Medical Clinic and their expansion. So Shannon Campbell and Paula Markell have come in and had multiple conversations with me. They have purchased the piece of property that was directly next to Callahan County Medical Clinic. They're getting ready to tear that building down and expand
South of there? Or
west.
Okay.
Just due west of them. It's the yellow building that's directly next to their property.
Okay.
And they're currently in conversations and offers are being tendered to take the old gas station on the corner. So what they are going to do is build a medical complex. They're working to bring in a pharmacy, they're working to bring in multiple clinicians that are willing to come in out of the Abilene area and set up practice, potentially a pain management specialist, potentially a dentist, a compounding pharmacy. They want to do some spa-type treatments and things like that. So in talking to Natalie, instead of just having a very narrow approach to it, the whole entire First Street could benefit from the project. And then when we started talking about being non-contiguous and what Oak Street could look like and what it could do for the businesses along North First Street, it just made sense that we expand the boundaries, that we try to be as encompassing as possible, because we know that there's businesses that are looking to come in. We know that Reagan Patton is doing all the rehab on the buildings down here, and this might be a tool to help, because Reagan's come in to talk to me a few times. This will be another tool to help move his projects along and bring in the businesses that we're looking to attract to create that downtown corridor. So now we're gonna have the sports complex, which will generate pad site development, will generate hotels, but we've always wanted to maintain a focus on downtown. And we want to maintain a vibrant downtown. So this gives us this opportunity to do that. And like Natalie and David said, the boundaries are wide, but if there's, just because the boundaries are set, not everybody's automatically eligible for anything. And they have to do something that creates the value, and that it has to come back to the TERS board and council. If you're gonna go into agreements
gotta
with
do-
them.
This, you've got to do two of them. You can't combine the one downtown and the one out on the interstate or into one TERS? or-
You can, well, typically I do like to see that the downtown TERS is a little bit more focused, just in terms of creating that sense of place and identity, being able to have its own. Now, this one does have another area that is being proposed to be included in the downtown. The only other thing that I would say, and David, if you have any thoughts on this, feel free to jump in. On the other project, because they are such large-scale projects, I think that the developer would be a little bit antsy about too many hands in the cookie jar. So sometimes they can see that as a conflict, and it really isn't, but there can be optics there that the developer will say, well, I don't want Joe's hardware store jumping in line in front of me for my project. It can sometimes get a little bit complicated, and then also just in terms of the projects that are being incentivized. And when I look at a downtown project, I see maybe more of a need for like pedestrian experience focus, something that you can kind of almost a little bit more city initiated types of projects. However, it can be up for discussion. And on that second slide, I'll just let him move to that. So this is a slide that this is sometimes where we tried to, David created a TERS in Dallas that they called the barbell TERS because it was like so far apart, but it was kind of stealing from the north to pay for the south. Yeah.
But there was no.
There was no container, but it was so far away. But this is a site where Mr. McGuire has mentioned that there's a multifamily project slated for.
Yes.
And what you could potentially do there. I don't know actually if the multifamily developer has asked for incentives on this one.
So the reason that this makes sense to expand the TERS to this area as well is the multifamily developer has bought the remaining parcel of land, so he owns that whole parcel of land now. So there was no immediate ask for the multifamily, the 200-unit apartment complex. But what he wants to do, and this was generated in all the conversations with TxDOTs and right-of-ways off the access road and 175-foot separation between access points in, was to put a road to connect County Road 120 to the access road. And then on the remaining acreage on the east side, the same developer is gonna pad site that whole remaining acreage out for retail development. So his concept is a very walkable, outside a gated apartment complex community, a road, north-south road. He wants to do 10 foot of sidewalks on each side of the road, make it completely walkable, and then you transition into the pad space, retail pad space. So it's a very unique concept for Clyde. We've never done anything like that before, but it gets to creating a more walkable community, a more family-oriented community, and it ties into what Natalie just said, because as the city takes over the paving and we do the projects that we have scheduled, Oak Street becomes one of the best streets in the city to put sidewalks the whole length of Oak Street as we redo the roads and have that welcoming downtown corridor into the downtown, the business district. So instead of trying to create a third TERS, and this just made sense when we found out that we didn't need to be contiguous. And that is the one ask that the developers come back to me was the road and sidewalks, and a TERS would be able to do that. And he was very happy to hear that we were initiating this process. And then it also alleviates the multiple access points in with TxDOT, because if we put in a road and connect it to the county road, we're not gonna have the same barriers or impediments that he is trying to get TxDOT to grant him multiple entrance into his own property.
And one of my new favorite things to do with TERS is start to pledge potentially like 75% of the city's real property tax rate to the TERS. And on a project like this, you could potentially negotiate maybe 50% of the TERS revenue going back to the developer, which would leave you that extra 25% that you could then dump into your Main Street, to Oak Street. So you
Or
could.
not going back to the developer, but developer-initiated projects.
Developer,
public
yes,
infrastructure.
exactly.
Right.
So instead of spending 75% of the increment within the boundaries of this part of the TERS, you could potentially put a portion of that, and it could act as a Kickstarter to doing some of your downtown projects.
In
So,
the other TERS
and,
district that we've.
exactly.
And I want to get to the question that was asked before about lumping this. I think with the first TIF that we were looking at, it does get financially complicated when you're looking at revenue streams, because it's really first in, first out, and when people get repaid. So those that take the first risk get paid back, and you can do it in two ways. One is an eat what you kill or pledge the entire district. We recommend an eat what you kill, performance-based. If you produce these taxes, we will give you a portion of them back to pay for that public right-of-way that you put in. So to put it in with downtown, I would be afraid that they would say, there's a big sucking sound. If you remember,
Yeah.
you're old enough to, the big sucking sound with NAFTA that Ross Perot talked about.
You got
But-
apple pie over here and a lemon meringue.
Yeah.
Exactly, but what Natalie's talking about here is when you're doing a downtown TIF, let's first of all say that TIFs are one of the most common economic development tools for bringing, energy and vibrancy to downtowns. You look at all the major downtowns across the state of Texas, they have a TIF in them. Now, they move slowly because the projects aren't huge. They're in the $200,000 to $700,000 range. You put in a multifamily project, you're talking about millions of dollars. And so what Natalie was talking about, if you're negotiating it here, you have bandwidth to be able to spend it over here. So you're accomplishing that rather than going through, and the thing about the TERS is it's a dedicated fund. So rather than going through your negotiated process of your budget process, which we always know that's the city managers and y'all's favorite time, is setting the tax rate and everything else, is that it gives some certainty to the infrastructure and the plan that you're trying to put forward. And so that's what developers first ask the city manager is, do you have a TIF? Are you willing to do it? Okay, are you willing to help pay for, reasonable expectations of public infrastructure that typically would already be in place? And then you can also use the excess to help facilitate policy goals. And so towards the end of this, we'll talk about kind of what our deliverables are, but we will give you a menu of options. We're not saying there's one way or the other, but we'll give you multiple participation rates and those type of things and how you can spend that money.
Very good, thank you. Dave.
So we have the two TERSs, TERS number 1 and TERS number 2. Our proposed next steps that we're here to discuss with you today is that we would spend April and May drafting a project and financing plan, one for each TERS. The project and financing plan includes, it's a document that's required by the state. It's governed by Chapter 311. Why did I just blank on that?
Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code.
The Texas Tax Code. It has to include certain things, and so it includes the boundaries. We have to do a legal description so that a reasonable person could determine if their property is located within a TERS. The future development assumptions is really kind of the meat of the discussion. And so we would work with Mr. McGuire and we would work with the developers to say, what do you think you're going to build and when do you think you're going to build it? And so typically that'll look like multifamily, 300 units, commercial, 20,000 square feet by 2026. And then what we do is we do an analysis of what those types of properties are coming on the tax rolls in your county. A lot of times we get into kind of discussions, I will call them, with developers because they'll say, I'm gonna spend $300 million to build that multifamily complex. And we'll say, well, it's only gonna show up on the tax rolls for $150 million only, right? They kind of talk out of both sides of their mouths because when they're talking to their tax assessor, they don't want it to come at the higher value, right? But then when they're looking at what my incentive's going to be, they want us to use, well, I'm gonna spend a lot more money than that to build it. And we're gonna say, well, the tax revenue is not gonna be based off of what you're gonna spend to build it. It's gonna be based on what's fair and equitable in your county. So that's part of our analysis is we take a look at different tax comps of what multifamily projects are coming online at, commercial. We'll pull up your Starbucks and say, okay, what is that coming online? It's pretty new, right? And so that's a good comp for us because it's a new construction. Then we do our taxable value analysis and we say, okay, if the developer were to build XYZ by this date, based on our tax values that we have established, we are projecting that the property within the term of 20, 30 years would produce $100 million in incremental tax revenue. Okay, well, if we put $75 million of that into the TERS, that's $75 million worth of TERS revenue. What would we want to spend that on? And then that's where we put it into these buckets. As David mentioned, we do water, sewer, streets, parks, open space, etc. We just assign percentages to it. So it might be $20 million in streets, 10 in water, etc. That's just to serve as a guiding document so that whenever somebody comes forward and says, I would like $10 million in streets, you can look at your project and financing plan and say, okay, well, we had allocated $20 million to streets. You want 10, that works with our project and financing plan. But we always allow the flexibility in the document. We put the sentence, the caveat there that's checked off by the attorneys that savings from one line item may be applied to another. So if you as the TERS board and city council say, we've spent 20 million, but this person wants 10 for streets, we can take some from the open space bucket and put it in streets because that's what we think is most important. You have that discretion, and again, as David mentioned, you have two different opportunities to consider those requests, first as a TERS board and then city council.
And Alan, I just want to say that just over almost 3 decades of doing this, we used to have the engineers come up with this list. What's everything that's needed? And basically I say, I wish I could predict what I need 10 years from now. Okay, and so it would change and it requires a totally revamping of the document. What this allows is for some adaptability. Maybe TxDOT comes in and is paying for that road. Well, that cost just went away. Yeah. So then everything goes into, I need sidewalks, I need drainage. Drainage is a big issue for a lot of projects that we have. I need sidewalks. Or my economics for what the city wants just doesn't work. So maybe we consider a little bit of a piece, maybe, 3/4 of its infrastructure and 1/4 of it's an economic development grant that's going to help close that gap. So you have the full menu in front of you, but once again, it's just that, it's a menu. It requires the TIF board and the city council to approve any allocations from that.
You must be hungry because I'm going to go ahead and say it's more like a pie chart than an itemized list, right? So you're just slicing up that $75 million into different categories versus having we're going to pay for 10 linear feet on Main Street. Like, you don't know, what if it's 12 feet or it's only 8? And then you have to come back and amend the document It's just a pain in the rear, so nobody wants to deal with that. The document will include the city participation, and we'll work with Mr. McGuire to discuss what we think would be a reasonable level of city participation in the term. I will say typically TERSs are set for 30 years. If you decide that you don't want to do this tool anymore, as long as you don't have any outstanding obligations, you can terminate the TERS. It's not that you have to keep it open for 30 years. But we have found, especially with that first TERS, that allowing there to be a longer term allows for there to be money generated within the TERS, because typically you're not gonna see any sort of substantial amount of TERS revenue until maybe year 5. Just because the nature of construction and by the time the TERS revenues start to come in. Again, it will include that proposed project costs, the menu of eligible categories. So all of that will be included in the project and financing plan, which we'll be sure to share with you prior to you voting on it. I will say, if you'll go to the next slide, okay, thank you. The city council would first consider the creation ordinance for each of the TERSs. We're looking to bring these on a parallel track. The creation ordinance would establish 5 key elements: the boundary, the term, the TERS board, which we would recommend that the TERS board be made of the city council, the city participation, and then again, that preliminary project and financing plan will be included as an exhibit to that creation ordinance. Once the TERS 1 and 2 have been created, then the final project and financing plans would need to be approved by the TERS board and then city council by separate ordinance. So there would be 2 separate TERS creation ordinances. There would be a TERS 1 board meeting where you would need to recommend approval of the TERS board. Then you would have a TERS number 2 board meeting where you would need to recommend the approval of the PFP. And then city council would then need to approve those project and finance plans 1 and 2. So typically there's 3 actions: city council approving the creation ordinance, TERS recommending approval of the project financing plan, and then city council recommending or approving the final project and financing plan.
Is there a time frame in between those board meetings to create that?
Yes, so between the city council creating the TERS and then coming back as the TERS board and then approving,
Yeah.
there typically is, just for everyone's sanity.
I mean, it seems like just about everything we do, we have that, and I'm just wondering, is there 30 days, 3 weeks?
No, there's no
what is there?
requirement. If by statute, we could create it, recess into TERS board, recommend approval,
And then come
come back to city council. So we
We
typically.
don't want to do that,
Yeah.
but it's possible. So
I
that-
will say that typically we do the TERS board meetings and the city council approving the PFP together. We typically do those on the same day.
If I can just make this comment, that if we've done our job right, before we come to you on June 13th, you're gonna be totally comfortable with that preliminary project and financing plan. So hopefully there's no changes to that between the preliminary that's approved. So there's 2 ordinances that we're approving. A creation ordinance that sets the boundary term, everything that Natalie says, and it has the attached preliminary project and financing plan. Our goal, and typically what we do, is once the TIF board approves it, we scratch out preliminary and it becomes final. And then that just is attached to an ordinance. So it's all about scheduling. It's all about scheduling.
So June 13th, we would likely have everything we needed as far as information in place, and we'd want to work with, between June 13th and then July 11th, we would have our 2 meetings, if that's what we do. We would have that time frame there. So by the time we come back to that July 11th board, everything, if everything, the way we worked it, would all be in place, and we'd just vote on it that night on the 11th. So
That's
within that 30-day period, within that 1-month meeting time frame, we can do everything.
Correct. I do.
Well-
The June 13th is kind of a key date because that's where you're talking about boundary and participation. And if we can go back a slide, what we do is we'll provide you with a matrix of participation rates, and we typically just like to show them of 25%, 50%, 70%, 100%. You know, we have cities that go, I want to put everything into this TIF.
Yeah.
Okay? We don't think, our preference is 75%. You might have a tolerance for 50%, but once again, the 50% of something is better than 100% of nothing. Because if we don't put in this TERS, we run the risk of not having any increment coming in and paying for these projects. And so then we're fighting through the normal budget process and, you know, the effective rollback taxes and everything else. So I think that we will give you and the city manager the analysis, and you will have everything for that June 13th meeting. And so once you have that preliminary plan, the goal is that we don't have too many changes. And typically we don't
Yeah.
The
have
bulk
too
of the
many
work
changes in
occurs
there.
before June
Yeah.
13th.
Yeah, and so you will have that in, you know, in workable form, and we'll work with the city manager to make sure that you have all the data that you need and say, hey, I think this is a little too rich, scale it back, or whatever. We put everything in matrix.
Yep, yep.
And, you know, what's that sweet spot for you guys?
Yeah, okay.
Speaking of sweets, I'm hungry too.
Very good, thank you for that.
With that, we'll take any other questions that you may have.
Sorry, I jumped ahead on the question,
Oh, no,
didn't I?
that's
The
all right.
questions were on the next page.
Hey, questions throughout are the way to go.
Council?
I just always, you kind of lost me for a second when you said PFP. That is
The project
the
and financing.
project and financing plan, and I wrote that in. The acronyms have the potential to lose multiple people. So I just wanted to be sure of that. You know, through the document, all the other acronyms were beautifully explained. I don't know if you can answer this question or not, but I'm looking at these cities. Collin County cities. I just almost drool with curiosity, wanting to know McKinney, Plano, Frisco, downtown Terps.
All have a downtown TERS.
Oh, my goodness.
Anna has a downtown TERS.
Salina has a beautiful downtown.
Salina has, we just updated their downtown TERS.
Their downtown
And they're
is
building a
darling.
new,
Absolutely
civic facility down there.
And it's, as a community, when I think about the McKinney and Plano downtowns, which are the ones that I'm most in the most, the layout of the downtown actually slows down everything. There's minimum of parking, and I'm kind of talking to the community as much as I am to you guys. I'm looking to you guys for confirmation, because my imagination is going bonkers. Parking is a premium. Walking is really sweet. And then I see Europe in my head. There are very few cars in certain places. And it's beautiful, just beautiful. But it's a way of thinking that is different from Interstate 20. And different from the way that we burn up vehicles and burn up fuel in our society, in Texas especially. So anyway, I appreciate you confirming what was developing in my mind, because those are beautiful green spaces in those communities, and Clyde has the potential to be just as beautiful and just as healthy. And so, anyway.
No, we did first day of Natalie's work, we did I did the downtown Tyler TERS. And then the city manager moved to Kerrville, and so we did the downtown Kerrville TERS. And so if there's a downtown, there is a need for a TERS, because it's exactly what you're talking about. It's that traffic calming. It's where do we park if we have these boutiques and everything else, because parking's always an issue. I will give you two closer examples, or a couple of closer examples. One is downtown Fort Worth. You know, that was, at the time when it was put in place, Ed Bass was saying, well, wait a minute, when's the last time the city spent any money downtown? And they said, well, that was 1972. And so and he goes, we have $300 million here in taxable value. Where's that money being spent? And it was being spent up north and to the south. How do I spend money and make sure that it stays in my zone, if you will? The Stockyards is the TIF. I did a TIF, downtown plan, and a TIF for downtown Amarillo. How do we pull people off of 20? And I don't know if you've seen downtown Amarillo, but it's really, we did the first hotel, the Fisk building. And they now have that was our idea, was putting in the stadium down there. So you have the right ingredients here, going all the way from Collin County to Fort Worth to Abilene, all the way to Amarillo, to where they're pulling people off of 20 and slowing them down and letting them enjoy the experience.
Amarillo's 40, right?
Up to 40, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But I mean, but it was, the question that I got was, why would somebody get off 40? Because we're just stopping here on our way to New Mexico and Colorado. And we said, well, look at the great historic buildings we had, and we took a historic building, office building, converted it into a courtyard. And now they have a convention headquarters hotel, they have the Dillas, or I forget what the minor league team that's playing there, but the whole downtown has been transformed because of the Turners.
Very good information.
Alright.
Council, any other council have any other questions, thoughts, comments?
If anything comes to you later, Mr. McGuire knows how to get a hold of us, and we'll be trying to send out some updates on the process as we move forward. And, yeah, thank you so much for your time today.
Natalie, David, thank y'all both so
Thank
very
you.
much. Great information, and we look
Timing
forward to
worked out
working
great
with
too, because we thought it was 7, but, you know, I.
And honestly, we used to have our meetings at 7. We changed it a little while back, and we might not have got everybody notified on that, so y'all are fine.
Hey, I like how things work out. They always do.
This worked out great. Thank you guys
Thank you
very
very
much.
much.
We appreciate that. Okay, at this time, we will now go to 9.0, move into executive session. I'm not gonna reread y'all everything. I'm not gonna give you the same speech I gave y'all a while ago. If y'all wanna stay, stay. If you wanna go, go. Thank y'all for being here very much. We appreciate it.